Hi, so recently I re-listened to Nishith's most recent album, Route 103, and it's been a while since I've heard it, so I wanted to give some updated opinions. Now this was a very strange listen to me, as Route 103 is oddly nostalgic? At least to me it is. I think it's probably because it's one of the first albums that I went through the full rollout of Squidecca, and so it kind of holds a little special place in my heart. So being completely unbiased about my opinions on it is kinda hard. This project holds a very special place in my heart, as it was the biggest album to make me really want to solidify my music as something good instead of just making fun, quirky, songs for friends. And later albums down the line, such as Serene, really kept that going for me. So even with all that in mind, I still want to try to give a completely unbiased critical look at the project. And with that being the case, I have to say that this album really kind of aged poorly. Now, in no ways do I think it's bad, however, there's a lot of things that I don't remember nearly being as rough or incomplete as I see them now. And some of the songs even feeling like complete copies of other existing songs by different artists. The most prominent example of this is Short of Breath, sounding like a complete copy of Kodak Moment by Jane Remover. And this comparison has been brought up multiple times through Squidecca, and I think the argument that was made kind of commonly was that it doesn't matter if it's copied, if it still sounds good, and while that holds some weight, it's still very, very distracting when listening to it. Actually, I think this project has a lot of great ideas, but there's also a balance of really questionable ones that distracts me throughout the whole thing and makes it a lot more of a harder listen than it needs to be. All Caps is a great example of a very hard track that is kind of taken away a little bit from the verse, giving vibes like this song. You don't want that. I do think Playing with Fire is a good step in the right direction, if not it feeling just kind of like a typical hyperpop banger and almost reaching generic territory. Which I'm not saying is necessarily a bad thing, however, I do wish there was a bit more flavor to it. But of course, I can never forgive the line, wishing that I didn't ruin the lives of all my friends. You ask me who's the man, bitch I'm him/them. What? Obviously it has a good message and all, but it feels so goofy for such a song that takes itself so seriously. The overall tone feels kind of inconsistent, however, I do think the track itself is okay. And then we reach Cellular, which honestly I feel like is a bit overrated. I don't know, it just doesn't really connect with me as much as the other songs do, and I get bored halfway through, probably because the delivery feels lifeless. I feel like it goes on for too long and not much changes until the drill switch up at the end, but that isn't enough to pull me back. It's grown on me a little bit since I first heard it, but I just don't think it's quite there yet. And then Curtain Call plays, which I just think is a humble, nice banger. It gives that very cheery hyperpop vibe that I really like. I like whenever hyperpop songs are super uplifting and hyper. I think even for a simple hook, it does its job pretty well, and it's really catchy. However, I do think that the track goes on for too long near the outro because there's so many different sections that play through, and it just doesn't really feel necessary. It's almost like he was trying to push the song to be 3 minutes by the end, and it still didn't even reach that. And then transitions into Blossoms in DC, which I'm not crazy about, but that's just because I'm not crazy about interludes. Interludes to me almost seem like filler in every single circumstance. I feel like you'd be able to get a point across so much easier if you just made a song about it, instead of just having an instrumental or a skit. And in this case, I feel like it's the same. Blossoms in DC is just an instrumental that plays, and while it's nice, I just wish there is something over it. And then we move on to the second half of the album, introduced with The Flash Was Off, which I think is the best song on here. This super glitzy and glamorous beat combined with some really nice melodies make it such a fun experience. Also, I think this was a song that was shown off on a Hive Mind livestream too. I'd also like to see a sort of remix of the track. I think an artist like Kits would work really well on something like this. While the track stands out well enough on its own, I think it'd just be a nice bonus to have a remix version with a feature, especially considering this album has no real features. And then Backstabbers next, which I have pretty mixed opinions on. On one hand, I think the instrumental goes insanely hard, and the second half, whenever there's another drop with the guitars coming in, I think it is crazy. However, on the other hand, the hook isn't that great, and it sounds like Nishith has some sort of fucking lisp throughout it. And also how the idea of a backstabbing friend is presented here is absurdly corny. Like, I can't ever imagine like a concert where a bunch of people are chanting the hook to this. I feel like 90% of them would be cringing too hard at themselves while doing it. However, I do still find it a bit of a guilty pleasure song. I can enjoy it for the song just sounding nice. However, a song that I can't really enjoy no matter how much others do or don't is Short of Breath. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the clear copy and paste nature of Kodak Moment, or it just doesn't really have a sticking sound to me, but I just can't really get into it that much. I find sections of it cool and sounding quite elegant, but none of it really brings me in. And it doesn't help that the lyrics are very non-specific and don't really make me connect with Nishith that much. I don't know. I don't really have much to say about this one, except I'm just not big on it. And then we move on to the formal outro of the album, Effaced. And I actually really like this one. I connect a lot more with the lyrics, especially because they're the center focus. I actually think Effaced does emotion a lot better than Short of Breath can ever do. The nice guitar melody that transforms into a lot more of a sweet kind of progression of strings that surround you really hits home with the emotion of the track. And I think the hook is really catchy and gives me goosebumps a lot of the times I hear it. I think this is the perfect outro for this album, which is immediately ruined by the bonus tracks. Now look, I'm not going to change my rating on the album just based on the bonus tracks, but it's clear these are only here for boosting streams. They're such a step down, and honestly, I think the streaming version would have been a lot better just without them. If I had to describe Route 103 with just one piece of media, I would use this graph that I made. It has a lot of highs and it has a lot of lows. However, overall, I think the second half is a better experience than the first half. So looking back throughout the project, I think it definitely has its own style and stands out from the rest of the hyperpop scene. And I do think, for the most part, it's an enjoyable experience with the exception of Cellular, Blossoms in DC, and Short of Breath. But again, I do think this is a step in the right direction for Nishith. So overall, what would I rate this project? I was conflicted for a while, stuck between giving it a 6 and keeping it at its original rating of a 75. However, I think lowering it to a 70 properly reflects my viewpoints right now. Some tracks have grown on me quite a lot, and some have grown off me. And I think overall this is an enjoyable experience, however, it could use quite a bit of improvement. So anyway, thank you all for watching, and I'm sorry this took so long to get out, but I've just been really busy. I dropped my own single a few days ago, The Rabbit Girl Experience, and it is in the description and comments if you want to go listen to it. Down there as well will be the link to Route 103 and the Album of the Year link so that you can review it on your own. Anyway, see you later.